Hi everyone, my name's Jen. I'm an author and a book reviewer, and I'm here today to start one of the main videos I do every year, which is reading the entire Women's Prize for Fiction longlist. I guess so you don't have to. I mean, if you want to, please do go ahead and read all of the longlist. But if you would just like to know which ones I like because we have similar taste and you want to check those out, then keep watching. And if we don't have similar taste, you can find out which books I don't enjoy from the long list and you can go and read those because, you know, we find recommendations in all kinds of ways, right? What works for some people does not work for others. As I'm filming this, the long list has just been announced. I am waiting for review copies to land with me and I haven't looked at the long list yet. What I've done is I've asked Mr. M to put pieces of paper with all the long listed titles in this box, and I'm going to pick them out and see what's on the long list. This bit is going to be really short because I tend to film one video where I read and review all of the books, and by the time that video goes up, which should be just before the shortlist is announced, if you follow the prize you already know what's on the long list, so I won't bore you by going into a huge amount of detail here, but as I'm filming this I don't know what's on the long list and I'm quite excited. So let's find out what's on the long list. My guesses right now, I had a few. I thought maybe The Girls Who Grew Big by Layla Motley, maybe The Best of Everything by Kit Duvall, maybe Original by Nell Stevens. I'm sure there was another one that I had on my prediction. It escapes me. Anyway, it matters not. Let's find out what's on the list. I don't have the books in front of me, just the titles. So if I don't know what the book is, then we can find out about that when the books arrive. So it'd be interesting to see how many I've actually heard of. If you're new, I work in publishing. I've written 15 books. I've worked as a bookseller and also as a freelance editor. I've worked in the book world for 20 years. But at the moment I am parenting full time, slotting in work during toddler's nap times. I have a 2-year-old. So I would say probably I'm slightly less familiar with new releases than I was a while ago. So it's a nice test. These will obviously be in no order at all. So let's see. Okay, we've got Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. This one I have not read, but I know that BookTube went wild for her last book. She does nature writing, right? Nature writing, family drama. I think this one is set on an island near Antarctica, I want to say, and I think it's a climate crisis novel. So I'm looking forward to reading that one. Next up, we have, Dominion by Addie E. Citchens. I'm going to double check the pronunciation of that later. This is a Europa book, if I'm remembering correctly, and I think it's about two women who are writing about a man that they both know. One's maybe in a relationship with him and one is related to him. We will find out more when that book arrives with me. Audition by Katie Kitamura. This was actually one of my predictions that I forgot to say, which is very convenient for me to say, isn't it? But this was one of my favourite books of last year. It was it my favourite from the Booker Prize last year? No, it wasn't. It was my favourite from, I want to say from the shortlist. Was it shortlisted? I think it was. My favourite overall was Sea Scraper, but Audition by Katie Kitamura, I'm delighted to see it on this list because I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and I will talk about it more when I recap my review of it, but essentially it's quite experimental, postmodern, about theatre and identity and the assumptions that we make about other people. It is not really about plot. It's very playful. We'll talk about it later. Okay, then we've got The Others by Sheena Kalayil, which I am not familiar with. I have not heard about this one. This is Fly on the Wall Press, which is, I only know that because that's on this piece of paper. And I have not, they're a very small publisher. I have not read this book. I have not heard about this book. So I look forward to learning about it and then reading it. Next we have Paradiso 17 by Hannah Lillith Assadi. This one is a Palestinian novel. I have not read. I just know that it is a Palestinian novel. I look forward to reading it. How many times can I say I look forward to reading it in this video? Kingfisher by Rozie Kelly. I feel like I've seen this mentioned on a couple of other channels, but I do not know what it's about. It is again a very small press. It will arrive. I will read it. The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This one is an epistolary novel, I think, except I don't think, is it letters or it is letters, not emails. Yes, So there may be a couple of emails in there, but I think it's mostly like handwritten letters. Again, like one of the other books in here, I think it's supposed to be quite playful. Then we have Gloria Don't Speak by Lucy Apps. I haven't read this one either, but I know it is narrated, or at least the main character is a woman, I want to say late teens, early 20s, who has a learning disability. It is by another small press called Weatherglass Books. So we're seeing some really good indie press representation, which is fun. Moderation by Elaine Castillo. It's got a really cool cover with like melting people. I think, I will insert the cover here. If I'm remembering this book correctly, that's what the cover looks like. I've seen it knocking around. I don't know what it's about. I look forward to finding out. A Beast Slinks Towards Beijing by Alice Evelyn Yang. This has foiling, I think, on the cover. Again, it's one that I have seen knocking around. Is it Dead Ink Books? Yes, it is Dead Ink Books. And this one, I think, is about a woman whose father comes back into her life. And I think it is about inherited trauma. I will find out. Then we have Heart the Lover by Lily King. I haven't read any Lily King before. I know people who love her absolutely love her. I have never jumped into one of her books, but obviously I will be in this video. A Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar. This, again, I've seen knocking around. It is, I think this is a climate crisis novel as well. So we've got two climate crisis novels, which, is it weird to say that I'm excited to read those? Oh, Flashlight by Susan Choi. Another book that I read last year. Really enjoyed this one, but I think it was flawed, as are most books, possibly all books. I will discuss my full feelings on this later in the video, but interesting to see it on this list. And it was, I would say, it was in my top half of books that I read last year. Ooh, The Mercy Step by Marcia Hutchinson. This one I think is a Windrush novel, and I think it's narrated from the point of view of a child, and that either really, really works or really does not work. You've got to nail that voice. Okay, then we've got The Benefactors by Wendy Erskine. This one is about a young girl who is sexually assaulted, and I think the story is then narrated from the point of view of the parents of the boys who did the attack, which is an interesting concept. I look forward to seeing how that is executed. I haven't read it yet. And then finally, one of my predictions. There we go. We've got The Best of Everything by Kit Duvall, which I read. Was it the first book I read this year? I read it really early this year anyway, in I think it was January, and very, very much enjoyed that. Have already spoken about it on this channel, but I will also review it. It's about a woman who loses a man in her life who she thought was her soulmate, her everything, and then she finds out after he's died that that just wasn't the case from his point of view. So she's been living this complete lie, this fabrication, and it really destroys her. But then she goes on to rebuild her life, and yeah, I thought it was really compelling, and I was deeply moved by it, and it does feel like a very women's prize book. I don't know really what does that mean? What does that mean? I don't know, but sometimes you just get a feeling for a book. You think this is a women's prize book, this is a book. This, I feel, is a women's prize book. Okay, so I've read 3 out of the list of 16, so I still have 13 to read. Once the books start arriving, I will obviously start reading them, and then I will review them, and then at the end I can tell you my favourites. We can speculate over who we think might win, because my favourite and who I think might win, they're often different books, and we can talk about why those are different books later on. But I'm excited. It's always a project that I enjoy doing, so yes, I look forward to diving in, and once I have read some things and I have thoughts to share, I'll be back. So I will see you in 1 second, but for me it probably will be a week or so. Bye. Hi, I come to you from the doll's house. It's chaos here. It's absolute chaos. Apparently everyone was having dinner in the garden, but quite frankly it just looks like there's been a house party and people have drunk too much. So I'm gonna tidy this up after I film this clip, which is a frustrating but also quite satisfying part of motherhood that I secretly enjoy. So I'm going to do that. But that's not why I turned on the camera to talk to you. I turned on the camera to talk to you about 2 books. I've read one and DNF'd one. So let's start with the one that I've read and actually really loved, and that is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. I'm not sure why I decided to start with this book. There wasn't really any rhyme or reason. I just grabbed it. So yeah, this is, as I said, I think in the first section, an epistolary novel, which means it's a series of letters. And we're following Sybil van Antwerp, who is someone who adores writing letters. She is in her 70s, and every morning at about 10:30, she sits down for at least an hour to write letters to friends or family, or even authors who she's never met, to tell them whether or not she enjoyed their latest books, which I found hilarious. It is a very witty book, very sharp. It's kind of like Janice Hallett meets Elizabeth Strout. In fact, if you had told me Elizabeth Strout had written this book, I would 100% believe you. This feels as though it should be part of the Lucy Barton universe. It has that tone. So if you love those books, you will love this book too. So Sybil likes writing letters to people. She sees it as a way of opening up, but actually it seems to be a way for her to not open up at all, and to hold people at arm's length and to not talk to them face to face. The format really works because it means that when you are reading it, you have to piece together information gradually. There's a lot less exposition going on than if you were reading a straightforward novel, because obviously she's not divulging things to family and friends that they already know, because that would be ridiculous. Consequently, you end up thinking that certain characters have a certain relationship with her. Like maybe you think that someone is her, I don't know, her brother or her son or whatever, and then the further you get in, you realise actually that's a mistake, and they're related to her in an entirely different way. And I thought that was really effective. It keeps you on your toes, keeps you very engaged, looking for clues, like you're trying to solve a mystery, which is good fun. As I said, Sybil writes to authors. And the weird thing about this book, at least for me I found strange, is those authors write back, and those letters are included in here, and these are real authors. The only authors who write back, though, are authors who are now no longer with us, which I suppose is a conscious decision by Virginia Evans, so that it's not a little bit too weird to put words in the mouths of authors who are still alive. I think that Sybil writes to authors because she feels like she's an author herself. She writes so much. And I think she feels as though she's writing for an entirely different reason, but really at the heart of it, she's writing for very similar reasons that authors write, and that is to better understand ourselves and the world around us. I think she also writes to them because she's often writing to people who are writing about family, and she doesn't know the history of her family. She was adopted, so I think she admires other people being able to put those stories together, because it's a story she's always been curious about with regards to herself. So yes, this was really a joy to read. It feels as though you've just stumbled across an archive of somebody and you're trying to piece together who they were and what they wanted to say about themselves. It's, as I said, funny and heartwarming, but also there's a lot of tragedy in here as well. And I thought that played out very beautifully, and I was very moved by it. The only thing I think I will say is that the replies from authors kind of pulled me out of the story a little bit. I don't know if that was deliberate or just unfortunate consequence of using a device like that. But yes, no, really enjoyed that one. The book that I DNF'd is Heart the Lover by Lily King. And then, as I again mentioned in the first clip, loads of people love her books. She doesn't need me to love her books. And I think stylistically, this was probably never going to be my cup of tea. It's about 2 characters, I was going to say who are young, but that's not why I don't enjoy it, because I love reading about characters of all ages. But these characters are a bit pretentious. They're at college, they're having messy relationships with each other, and I just find that kind of dynamic quite frustrating to read. In the same way that I find things like Normal People by Sally Rooney very frustrating to read. And again, I know that like I am in the minority with that because so many people love it, but I just get it a little bit, I just feel a bit over it. I can't really think of a way to describe it. It's not that I'm not in that phase of life anymore, but obviously I'm not. Because I can read about all kinds of phases of life, whether I've been through them or I'm yet to go through them or will never go through them, and that's not the problem. But there's just something about this pretentious college kids that grates on me. I don't know what it is, but it was frustrating me anyway. But then I realised that this is a companion novel to writers and lovers, and that made me a little bit cross because the marketing around this, that's not anywhere. And I'm sure you could defend that because you may say you don't need to read writers and lovers in order to enjoy this. I personally would disagree from what I've been reading. So essentially the beginning of this book is set before writers and lovers, then writers and lovers happens, and the rest of the book, this book, is set after writers and lovers. So this would contain spoilers for the book Writers and Lovers. How many times can I say writers and lovers? And I just find that a bit perplexing, especially when it comes to prize books. Obviously it's fine just in general for that to be a thing. In fact, I love intertextuality like that, it's wonderful. But if a book relies on another one in order for you to get the most out of it, I don't feel like it belongs on a prize long list because a book needs to stand on its own 2 feet. I've judged lots of literary prizes before. That criteria has always been present. Maybe if I had loved the book, you know, the style of the book and the characters, I would be able to set aside the fact that this was a companion novel. But those two things combined, I found super frustrating. So I decided to part ways with this one. As I said, it has so many fans, it doesn't need me to love it. And I know that if I pushed through it, I wouldn't really enjoy it. And, you know, life is too short. So other people can and do love that, but that one is not for me. Before we get on to more reading, I've decided to dig through the archive videos from last year and insert my reviews of Audition by Katie Kitamura and Flashlight by Susan Choi. I don't think I reviewed Kit Duvall's The Best of Everything in full, so I will review that in a later clip on here. The reason I've decided to insert my old reviews of those books is because they were my thoughts when I read them initially, and these other books that I'm reading are going to have recency bias, I feel. So I want to make sure that I do those books justice by also giving you my initial opinions on them and my initial excitement, because I really did enjoy the books. So let me insert here my reviews of Audition by Katie Kitamura and Flashlight by Susan Choi, and then I will come back, present me will come back and talk to you about more books once I have read more. See you soon. There, that looks better. Looks much more respectable. I decided to read Flashlight by Susan Choi. This is a book that I enjoyed. I don't have a huge amount to say about it, and I think that's because it really heavily reminded me of a book that I read last year that I loved even more than this. I think if you can link a book with another that you have already read, it lessens your enjoyment of this one because you're always comparing it to something that you think is marginally better. So the book that I would compare this to is River East, River West by Aubrey Lescure, which was my favourite book from last year's Women's Prize Longlist. That is a book narrated by a teenager who's talking about how her American mother is marrying their Chinese landlord, and there's lots of discussions about China and America and about capitalism and communism and secrets in families, and also sometimes actually secret families in that book. And it's gorgeous. You then follow the stepfather's perspective and you follow his life throughout the decades before he met the stepdaughter's mother, and it's just so moving, and I sobbed so many times reading that book. This one is about a character called Louisa, and at the beginning we join her. She's woken up on a beach. She had been out walking with her father, and her father is presumed drowned. We then follow Louisa's life and her father's life, Cirque, and her mother's life, and again we're looking at family secrets. In this case it is not a discussion between America and China, but between America and Korea and Japan, because her dad, Cirque, is well, his family were Korean, but he was brought up in Japan. There are also discussions in here, massive discussions to do with capitalism and communism, identity, and yeah, covering very similar ground to River East, River West. And I just think that book is executed in a better way. I could not help but compare the two and found this one slightly lacking. Regarding the title, there's repeated imagery throughout this book of using a flashlight to look for truth, for ghosts, for secrets, and then sometimes wishing that you hadn't done that thing. Without getting into spoiler territory with this book, I would say that it genre-wise became something I wasn't particularly expecting. It becomes a little bit of a thriller towards the end, which was quite exciting. Structurally, I think the middle of this book is saggy. It could be cut. There were scenes that I didn't really feel added much to the rest of the text. There's also a character in here called Tobias who I just did not believe as a person, and I wasn't sure if that was particularly the point because none of the characters seem to truly know him. He's always been on the outskirts of their lives, so perhaps we were supposed to see him as this eccentric, unbelievable person because he's never fully realised to any of the people in this book. There's some really good disability representation in this book actually. Anne becomes disabled in her later life. That is Louise's mother, and I thought that that was handled really, really well. Some parts of the book I found a little boring and I had to really slog my way through. It's an interrogation of truth, asking if we can really truly know someone, and as I said, it has massive similarities to River East, River West, but also there are elements of things like The Bee Sting by Paul Murray or The Time Being by Ruth Ozeki, so if you were a fan of those books, I would suggest picking this one up. I don't think, or at least I hope, it's not going to be near my top of all of these books because I do think that the book is flawed, but I enjoyed reading it, spending time with these characters, and I was deeply moved in parts if I happen to be frustrated in others. And then the other one I want to talk about in this section is Audition by Katie Kitamura. This is a novel that is open to interpretation, and that is why it is so playful and fun whilst also probing at difficult topics and complex ideas. So we open with an unnamed narrator, a woman, a writer, and she's having lunch with a younger man called Xavier, and we're trying to work out what their relationship is with each other, and she thinks back on when other people have seen her having lunch or dinner with people and got the wrong end of the stick about her relationship with that person. So for instance, once she was having dinner with her dad and the waiter thought that she was a sex worker and asked her to come and meet him after she had finished with her client, but she was just out for dinner with her dad. And she says how people will make certain assumptions about you based on your gender and your race, and Xavier is there because he thinks that maybe she is his long lost mother. She is a writer, and she once was quoted saying in an interview that she had previously lost a child. What she'd actually said when she was being interviewed was that she had had an abortion, but the interviewer was uncomfortable with that and so rephrased that as having lost a child. Xavier read that in an interview and thought that she'd given a child up for adoption. He was adopted. He wants to find out if she is his mother, which is quite a bold thing to do, really. It's not really based on anything apart from their age and also their race. So because she is the right age and because Xavier thinks that they kind of look similar, she can fulfill that role for him, which taps into conversations that this book is having about what roles are open to actors, especially women and women who are not white of a certain age. Like, what box will you be placed into? What space will you be allowed to take up when it comes to stories that are being told? Anyway, so our narrator tells Xavier, I can't possibly be your mother. I've never had a child, so I mean, what are we to each other now? Where do we go from here? Because this feels like a little bit of a dead end. And then the entire novel flips and turns into something else. It's almost like you're reading two different realities, or perhaps you are reading a play that one of the characters is writing, and perhaps one part of this book is supposed to be their real selves and one is supposed to be the play that they are putting on, or maybe both of them are fictional pieces and you never really get to know the characters at all. That may sound a bit vague, but I can't really talk about it without spoiling it, and this book is so much fun. I would kind of just like you to dive into it, and I would love to know what you thought about it in the comment section down below if you have read it. I thought it was a ride. There were three things that I was reminded of when I read this book, I was reminded of The Seer by Ali Smith, which is a play that I think is out of print. It's my favourite play of all time. I mean, you know that I love Ali Smith, but this play is just so funny. It's about a couple in their home, and they are so bored and sick of each other that when a woman rocks up on their doorstep claiming to be the woman's sister, they don't want to talk to each other, so they allow her to come in and they pretend that they know her, they pretend that they've invited her to stay, and it just unravels into this completely breaking down the fourth wall ridiculousness. It's so good. I was also reminded of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf by Edward Albee, which is another very famous play, that one, which is about a couple who invent a son to kind of make themselves more interesting at a dinner party when they're hosting, and they're both coming up with alternate realities for this son that they do not have, and it's equally outrageous. The thing I couldn't really escape when I was reading this book, though, is I thought Katie Kitamura must have watched and loved the first season of The Rehearsal by Nathan Fielder. I mean, that's called The Rehearsal and this is called Audition. I would bet money, unlike Thomas from Sea Scraper, who doesn't bet. To be honest, I've never placed a bet either, but if one could bet money on such things, I would bet that she had watched The Rehearsal. If you have watched The Rehearsal, then you will have some kind of idea about how unhinged this book is. The Rehearsal by Nathan Fielder, how do you even explain it? I don't even know if you can explain it, but the first season is about him creating scenarios where people can rehearse difficult conversations that they have to have with real people in their lives by having actors embody that person, and it goes to ridiculous extremes. If you haven't watched it, go watch it, because it is brilliant and kind of a little bit like Synecdoche, New York. That it has that feeling to it. Anyway, without removing myself too far from this book by recommending lots of different things, I thought this book was really funny and also interesting, thought-provoking. I'm going to give another thing that it reminded me of. It reminded me a little bit of The Father, the film with Anthony Hopkins and Olivia Colman, which I think was initially a play, which manipulates the environment the characters live in to reflect one of the characters' dementia. And the way that the flat in this book is described really makes it feel like a stage. At one point all the lights are on and everything is really hot, like stage lighting is on all of them, and everything is being shown to the audience, but you're not sure what highlighted thing you're supposed to be paying the most attention to because everything is so loud. Yeah, this book I know will divide people and has divided people because it's a bit out there, but I really enjoyed that very much. You know what's funny? Listening back to me talking about Flashlight, I have fond memories of that book, and my initial review is a lot more negative than I remember. So I guess when I was talking about recency bias, that works both ways. You, I guess, recall your strongest feelings in that moment, and I am now looking back on that with more affection, I think. I am more forgiving of that book now. That's interesting. Anyway, before I talk to you about the next 3 books, let me first adjust my glasses. These have been grabbed a few too many times by a toddler, and they're kind of wonky. I noticed that when I was editing the previous clip. But some of you may like to know that I've had 2 lovely booktube related not encounters, like arranged like meetings since we last talked. I had a lovely morning with Lauren and Jean. We'll insert here. I mean, Lauren doesn't upload videos anymore. So yes, I mean, I forget that because I talk to her all the time because she's my friend, but I forget that many of you also know who she is, but I won't have seen her face for a while. And then I also met up with other Lauren from Lauren in the Books and Mercedes, and we had breakfast together a couple of days ago, which was also divine. It was lovely because I don't get to go out much and see pals because, you know, motherhood life, but that was so lovely and wholesome and warmed my heart. We talk all the time, but you know, that thing where the group chat gets to meet up in real life, lovely, warmed my soul. Okay, oh yeah, and I do have a piece of B-roll actually because Jean and Lauren and I met up at the Welcome Collection, which is a place that I really enjoy going, and they have an excellent gift shop, as do many museums. I love a museum gift shop, and I was so pleased to see that they had staff recommendation for owning it, which is, I should have a copy to hand. I don't, I'll insert it here. It's our anthology that we created, me and James and Lucy Catchpole. It is 22 essays written by 22 disabled writers who also happen to be disabled children, and it was a labour of love and we absolutely adore it. And yeah, they had it as a staff recommendation at the Welcome, so I signed copies of that, and they also had copies of Please Do Not Touch This exhibit as well, which I also signed, and that was lovely. Anyway, I did actually film for once in my life the tiniest bit of B-roll when I saw that, so I'll insert it here.
What does it say to you?
Well, we have a wonderful review here of Owning It, a powerful anthology of 22 autobiographical stories from disabled writers that bring honesty, humour and resilience to the forefront. It is an essential eye-opening read for those seeking to understand the diverse experiences of growing up disabled through authentic voices. Can confirm.
Yeah, so that was a lovely time. Anyway, let us talk about books. Where shall we start? I feel like I have quite similar thoughts on both of these books, which is interesting because I read them one after the other. Let me start with the one I enjoyed slightly more, and that is Moderation by Elaine Castillo. This is about a woman called Girly who is a content moderator. And the way I would describe this, it's kind of like The Dream Hotel by Leila Lalami from last year's Women's Prize meets We Had to Remove This Post. And I think this gave me more of what I wanted from We Had to Remove This Post, which was a very, very short book. And I feel like just scratched the surface of what could be possible when exploring this topic. So she is hired to be a moderator in this virtual reality game where you can relive certain historical moments and rewrite history. It's a very stressful job, and a lot of the people who work in this job are either immigrants or are the children of immigrants, and they have to deal with a lot of very violent white men in particular who want to relive, as they like to think of it, the glory days through virtual reality, and also behave in appalling ways which those periods in history would permit. And because it's virtual reality, it isn't just moderating a forum, which would be difficult enough. This is actually believing that horrible things are happening to you and witnessing terrible things. So it has a greater impact on your mental health. This book is examining white supremacy and AI and feels really timely, but the title Moderation, whilst Girly is being hired to moderate the other users of the game, what the book is really showing us is how she is having to moderate herself, like how she's having to make herself more palatable to those around her, and how many of the other characters are also doing that, maybe because they're not white or they're not straight or they are disabled. So how do we compartmentalize ourselves? How do we erase or silence part of ourselves? And also asking if we can rewire ourselves as well. And then who gets to commodify that? Because like with so many medical things or technological based things, the root of these inventions is often to solve a very real and important problem. Say a lot of disability technology, for instance, is then literally weaponized. If we're looking at exoskeletons, for instance, which could help somebody who may be paralyzed, that could also then be used in warfare, and that's where the money lies. So that is often where it thrives, for want of a better word. So this virtual reality game, the roots of it were in, thinking how could we help people with PTSD, for instance? How could we help people relive really traumatic parts of their lives in a healing sort of way? But because of the way the world is, this virtual reality has become something else entirely. and has been monopolised by people who should not be allowed anywhere near it. It's about the colonisation of technology, it's about fascist narrators, it's about toxic nostalgia. I did leave the novel feeling as though perhaps it was a tad overambitious with the number of topics it was trying to tackle. I could maybe have done with fewer offshoots, and also I did feel quite removed from the novel at various points, like pulled out of the narrative, but I think that was the point. You struggle to be immersed in this world because the main character, Girlie, struggles with the concept of immersion herself because she really doesn't want to give in to her inner feelings and let go because she's so guarded because she's had to be in her life. So yes, I thought this book was very compelling, and there's lots to love about it, which seems like a strange word to use given the subject matter. But I didn't fall head over heels in love with it. And likewise, then we have The Benefactors by Wendy Erskine, which I was super excited to read. The blurb, I think, is a little bit misleading. So the blurb frames it as you are discovering this story from the point of view of 3 women. It's a story about a young girl called Misty who is sexually assaulted by 3 boys who she would consider to be friends. And the blurb says you are going to uncover this story through the eyes of the 3 mothers of these boys. But that's not really what this book is. We get so many different perspectives from this book. And I just felt as though if that was the premise, it really should have gone for it, and we really should have stayed with those women and known maybe as much as they knew, instead of zooming out and seeing the bigger picture. I felt that almost defeated the point of the book. If we are going to zoom out and spend time with Misty in particular, which we do in this book, I would like to just spend time with Misty. That's where I wanted to be, which is obviously how you're meant to feel as a reader, because you are siding with Misty and you want the best for her and you want to know how she is. And whenever we left her and were with other people, I was a bit cross, but I was supposed to feel that because, you know, you don't really want to be in the heads of not very nice people. The way I ended up feeling about this book was how I felt when I read The Bricks That Built the Houses by Kay Tempest, which is a novel that introduces you to a character and then immediately tells you their backstory, their parents' backstory, their grandparents' backstory, so you can see how they grew up to be the people that they became. But I didn't really like that method of storytelling. Like, I got the point, I understood why it was being done, but I just didn't gel with it. I didn't gel with this one either, but not because the framework didn't work for me. It would have worked better, I think, if the blurb had delivered what it had promised, but because we were seeing from so many other perspectives as well, it felt as though this book kind of shied away from going all in, and I really would have liked it to have done that. There were some bits that I noted down that I loved, especially at the beginning of the book. We're talking about one of the mums, Frankie, and the description of her says she was a scribble of a person, which I really enjoyed. And I think it's Frankie who's in a taxi, and the taxi driver opens the window to let all the melancholy out because they can't deal with how heavy the air feels. "We're all envelopes" was a quote that I really enjoyed. And then this is a quote about being with your mother. It says, "Being with their mum was like sitting at a table at school with the legs all different sizes, so you were always worried it was going to tip." I adore that. Can I read that one more time? "Being with their mum was like sitting at a table at school with the legs all different sizes, so you were always worried it was going to tip." I feel like some of the observational stuff in this is so on point and wonderful, but bigger picture stuff didn't particularly work for me. Actually, interesting conversation between both of these books, between The Benefactors and Moderation, asking who gets to pay reparations, who has to pay compensation for crimes, and where does blame lie, and both of these obviously are all about power as well. I didn't include my first review of The Best of Everything by Kit DeWall, because I think I didn't read it for a specific reading vlog, so I haven't really shared my thoughts. So let me just quickly insert this here, because I really adored this book. I have read quite a few of Kit's books, and my favourite is definitely her debut, which is My Name is Leon, but this one, oh, is it a new favourite? I think it's a very, very close second. So this is about a woman called Paulette who is in love with a man called Denton. She's going to spend the rest of her life with him, and at the very, very beginning of the book, Denton dies very suddenly, and then she discovers things about him that she didn't know, which makes her realise that her whole life has been built on a lie, and she just can't handle that at all, understandably. So she unravels, and then her life gets intertwined with someone who is mixed up in Denton's death. And we follow, well, we don't follow both of them. We follow Paulette, but we follow the other person through Paulette's eyes. There's a lot in here looking at care. And I know that Kit has worked in adoption, and you can definitely see that filtering into this novel in the same way that it filtered into My Name is Leon. That felt very realised, very believable. I was deeply moved by it. I cried a couple of times at this book. This book actually really reminded me of a book called Love Forms by Claire Adam, which was longlisted for the book of last year. So if you've read that book and loved it, you will really, really enjoy this one too. Paulette is a frustrating character to read because she makes some really difficult decisions. No, she makes some really questionable decisions. And because you spend all your time with her, you're so forgiving of her at first. I was really angry at many of the other characters in this book because I felt bad for Paulette. I thought that she was being poorly treated, and I think that she is by other people in this book. But also, the more you read and the more you see that things are being kept from you, almost like Paulette is rewriting things secretly, you then see that life is much more complicated, and she is very flawed in a way that you don't want to see initially because, you know, you're inside her head pretty much. So I really liked how that reveal happened, and it makes me want to reread the book so that I can see if I pick up on those things earlier and if I end up feeling very differently about all of the characters in this book. This really is a gorgeous book about found family, and I would say if you love Love Forms, you will love this. Also, if you're a fan of Rachel Joyce, I think you would really love this as well. Yes, wonderful stuff. Okay, I will talk to you when I've read some more. I went to film this clip out in the garden because I thought I never film outside, and then there are so many planes overhead. I remembered why I don't film outside. I'm not near an airport, but that's just what happens if you live in London. Anyway, the garden is looking spring-like and poppies are coming up, which is really lovely. And we have a lot of books to talk about inside where you can't hear the planes so much. Yeah, I've done a lot of reading. There were a couple of books that didn't work for me, so shall we start with those? This one in particular is just not my cup of tea. This is Kingfisher by Rozie Kelly. The tone of this book is... it's sometimes difficult to articulate why something doesn't work for you, and I was looking forward to reading this one because this is a queer story and it's told from the point of view of a queer man who's in a relationship with a man and then meets a woman who he wants to sleep with. That's basically the first sentence, saying how much he wants to sleep with her. And I need to take stock actually of the list as a whole, which I'll do at the end, but I feel like I would like more queerness in the list in general. I mean, I always feel that about stuff. So I was, really looking forward to getting to this one, but it just really irked me, I think, in a similar way to the Lily King book. Just quite pretentious people putting themselves in frustrating situations. And I know that I'm not a huge fan of reading about relationships in general, like as the main focus of a story, but that's not the only reason that I didn't gel with this. But I mean, there are going to be so many different voices in a prize list and some that just aren't going to work for me or click for me. And this is one of those. It's not that I can pinpoint something specific about the plot of this that I don't enjoy. It's that I just don't particularly like this writing style. So not one for me. Then I read Dominion. And this one I can really appreciate. I think it's very well written. It reminded me a lot of Tara Stringfellow's book Memphis, which was longlisted for the Women's Prize. Was that 3 years ago? Which was doing a similar thing, actually, following several generations of women who were talking about abusive men in their families. So looking at the violence of men through women, and this is what this one is doing too. So we're looking at the wife of a pastor and the girlfriend of the pastor's son, talking about their respective partners. I think, again, I will reflect on the list as a whole at the end of this video. So this isn't really a comment on this book, because this book obviously stands on its own. But if we're looking at the contents of the entire list and reading the books one after the other, I'm feeling quite fatigued by the amount of violence and sexual violence in these books. I completely understand why that is a topic that's coming up time and time again, and I obviously just wish that it wasn't. But this is the world that we live in. I think basically what I would like is less discussion of men in these books. Like, that's what I would like. I would like, even though this is told from the point of view of women, I would like more female connection instead of talking about men all the time. So for instance, Layla Motley's The Girls Who Grew Big is a group of women who have experienced similar treatment to the characters in Dominion, but are creating something and are coming together, and it's more about their communication and connection rather than each individual character in isolation in relation to the men in their lives. Yeah, I would like a bit more from that, which is unfair to put on this book on its own, because on its own it's fine. It's just in the context of reading lots of books that have a lot of violence in them, it's draining, isn't it? So yeah, while I didn't love this book, I do think it's very well written, and I will read you the very opening sentence. It says, Reverend Sabre Winifred Jr. believed without a shadow of a doubt that an idle mind was the devil's workshop, but an idle hand belonged on a behind, which is amusing and also creepy. So yes, not for me sadly, but appreciate it nonetheless. Sorry, my camera battery died, but at least it died between books instead of in the middle of one. But as I was about to say, I loved the next book, which was The Mercy Step by Marcia Hutchinson. This is narrated from the point of view of Mercy, a young girl. By the end of the book, she's 10, but we actually start the book with her in the womb. I couldn't particularly take the beginning of this book seriously when she was narrating from the womb. I guess if we're going to be positive about it, it could seem mythical, in the same vein as books by Emily Northam, who's done, you know, a similar thing where she narrates from the point of view of a child who knows things she couldn't possibly know, as if she's godlike and has lived many lives. That's what Mercy was like. But I just couldn't suspend my disbelief. I just kept on thinking of things like Stewie from Family Guy, and that was quite jarring because it's quite a serious book with funny elements. It meant I couldn't be completely immersed to begin with, but then I got used to her voice and I came to believe her as a narrator. It took a while, but we got there. So Mercy's been born into a family in the UK. Her parents have moved over from Jamaica. She's the middle child in the UK, but actually her mum had to leave some of her children behind in Jamaica. That's so, I just can't get my head around that. Reading those sections of the book was really, yeah, that's very upsetting. And Mercy's family life is very unstable, unpredictable. Her dad is prone to violence. Her mum relies very heavily on her faith and God. She waits for fate to kind of save them, which puts them in very difficult positions because she's not willing to make a move herself when she really should be doing things to protect her children. So Mercy takes it upon herself to protect her mum. And as an adult reading it, you feel the weight of that, and you feel so deeply for Mercy because you know she shouldn't be put in that position. She should be cared for. She is a vulnerable child, but Mercy just accepts it because that's what children do. She thinks that's why she's been put on this earth, to protect her mother. And basically this whole book is about her coming to see her mother as an individual person, not just an extension of herself. She talks about still having the umbilical cord, that they're still attached, and it's waiting for that to snap. The thing that we all go through, the moment or series of moments when we realise that our parents are flawed beings. That's the realisation that Mercy needs to come to. I thought there was so much to love about this book. Mercy ends up adoring libraries and reading. You see her starting school, discovering things like Panto, which she's been forbidden to go to by her mother because her mother thinks it's the devil. The way that this book is set out, it does feel quite disjointed. The chapters aren't really connected. It's just a series of memories. And I did think, well, is that knitted together in the best way possible? And the answer is no, but I think it's because that's how children remember things. You know, when we think of our childhood, we don't really see it as a neatly linked up narrative. We see it as a series of snapshots because, you know, that's how our brains work. So I think it was written in this disjointed way to reflect that, and I respect it. Even though I couldn't suspend my disbelief when she was narrating from the womb, there were still some lines in there that I really enjoyed. At one point she says every time her mum ate, her stomach would gurgle like an emptying bath, which I thought was lovely. There are some parts in the book though where I think the narrator over explains things. You could say that's because she's a child and she's thinking through everything very literally, but I just think there could have been less of that. Let me give you an example. Here we go. So this is when Mercy finds out that libraries are free and she's really excited. It's a real Matilda moment. Has the library lady forgotten some important information, like maybe black children are not allowed in? And all the time Mercy has been standing outside the library, she has only seen white people go inside. Mercy has seen civil rights marches on the TV, and in America black children can't go to swimming pools and stuff. And a little girl called Ruby Bridges wasn't allowed to go into a school, and the army had to take her in. And Ruby Bridges had her hair in big plaits just like Mercy. Then there was the time that Daddy came home all bruised and bloody because some white men got hold of him on his way home from work. They said he was taking their jobs, but Daddy said none of the white men would ever do his job. Mummy put Dettol on his bruises and he winced. Mercy thought he was going to cry. Is that why he's so angry all the time? I feel like we don't need the end question. It may sound like a petty point, but we're already thinking that, and I don't think that we need it spelled out for us. Like, we can see that Mercy's making those connections, that she's understanding why her dad is angry. I don't think she needs to actually state that. And there are quite a few instances of that. It's also very funny in parts. There's one part about going to church. So I've taken pictures of the pages and then I'm zooming in so that I can see the text. So it says, on Sunday, it's just their church upstairs, and once a month, the dog show downstairs. Very important. The upstairs room has old wooden chairs arranged along a central aisle and a lectern at the front. Mercy's family are not the only latecomers. Almost everybody is late because they don't want to get there on time and wait for the latecomers. So church starts later and later every week. Morning church is supposed to start at 10 a.m. and finish at 2 p.m. And evening church starts at 6 p.m. and goes on till 10. It's a long day. The first hour is always Pastor Foster desperately lecturing everyone about the need for punctuality. Heaven won't wait, he says, waving his finger at them. But he's talking to mainly an empty room, so he has to say it all again when everyone arrives. That really tickled me. I laughed a lot. As well as being funny, there are some really shocking things that happen in this book. And I think the switch between funny and shocking, it feels very childlike because Mercy will do it in a very matter-of-fact kind of way because that's what children are like, and especially it's what Mercy's like because she's used to this chaotic home life where things can change ever so quickly. So for her, that change in tone is just, you know, that's just what life is like. But for us reading it, it's yeah, it is shocking, and obviously I won't talk about specifics because that's spoilery, but I thought that was really effective. It's called the Mercy Step because she sits on a step on the stairs and plays with her doll all the time. I just remembered every year she wonders if people are going to remember her birthday, and they often don't, and if I think about that too much I may cry, so I'm just going to put that book down. Anyway, I really loved it, and I think that will definitely be on my shortlist when we come to talking about that later. And the last two books that I have to talk about in this clip before I move on to the final books from the long list, as in reading them and then talking to you about them, we've got the two climate crisis novels. I thought it would be interesting to read them side by side. I was going to say it feels unfair to compare the two, but it's a prize, and that's literally what we're doing. We are pitting books against each other, so I think it's all right. Let's start with the one that I enjoyed least, and that was Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. This is set on a fictional island off the coast of Antarctica. It's based on the seed reserve in Svalbard, so there's one on this island. And a family lived there protecting these seeds. They also had a group of other people with them, but they don't seem to be there anymore. Their communications have recently been cut off, and then one day a woman washes up onto the shore and they have to decide whether or not they're going to trust her. It's kind of like, do we save the world or do we save ourselves? That is the question that many of the characters in this are asking themselves, and I think it does ask lots of interesting questions about what it means to prepare for climate crisis, you know, as in globally, how do we prepare, but also how do we prepare as a family? Should we have children? Should we not have children? Like, how do we move through this world? How do we survive the day-to-day and also bigger picture stuff? There are so many genres in this book though. So there is a crime element, there is also obviously the disaster element, but then there's also a romance in this too. I sound like I hate romance, right? Like I hate love. I don't hate love, I just need to really believe in it. I did not believe in the love/lust that's going on in this book. I found that very ridiculous, just very against the way the characters were being presented to us as a reader. I don't know. I understand these characters are in peril, and if you're feeling lots of strong emotions and you don't have many other options, I mean, maybe you do just grab the person who's next to you, but also there are so many things going on. They have so many suspicions about each other. I found that a little bit perplexing. So it's very action-packed, actually. There's just a lot going on. As well as not believing in the romance, there were certain elements to do with the children that I didn't quite believe. I didn't really believe in the daughter living out in the wild with the animals. That felt a bit too folklory to me. And one of the sons can talk to ghosts. I understand that they've been cut off from society for a long time, so your view of nature is going to be very different. But just, I guess, the way it was all presented didn't feel particularly believable to me. I think it could have felt believable if written in a slightly different way. Overall, I just thought this book was quite messy, which I guess reflects climate crisis, right? The end of the world is very messy and complicated and confusing, but I don't think that's going to save my feelings towards this book, unfortunately. However, the other climate crisis book, hello, I think we could have a winner here. This is A Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar. Spoiler, both of the characters in this book are guardians and thieves. Clever. So we're following primarily two characters in this book. We're following Ma, who is about to move to the States from Kolkata with her father and her daughter. Her husband's already moved to America, but she needs to go and collect their visas and passports from the passport office. And then we're following Bumba, who is someone who is struggling to save his own family, and he is presented as the thief initially, and he steals the passports of Ma and her dad and her daughter. That's in the blurb. It happens very early on. And the whole book is about Ma trying to get these passports and visas so that she can escape Kolkata with her family. So this is a very stressful book. And I am not okay. It made me feel the same as when I read Hum by Helen Phillips, which, for context, was my favourite book of last year. That's also a climate crisis book about a family trying to do the best for itself when the world is betraying it. I was so invested in this. The interesting thing about it is obviously that you are rooting for Ma. You want her to get her passports back. You want her to get her visas. You want her to be able to escape and have a better life. But of course, Bumba, who has stolen the passports and the visas, he's also just trying to save his family and have a better life. Why shouldn't he have that? What makes him less deserving than Ma? This is really all about ethics and morals, and makes you question yourself and where you're putting your loyalties. As a reader, you are, I guess, wanting somebody else to fail and be put in very difficult circumstances at the benefit of somebody else. And that makes you complicit, and that's really uncomfortable. I actually don't have much else to say about this book, which often happens with books that I adore, because I'm so swept up in them and I want to find out what's going to happen. I find myself being less analytical about it. Maybe on a reread I'll underline things and I'll make more notes, but basically I just adored this book. The ending shocked me a lot, and I did have to take a step back from it and think, okay, do I actually really love this? Because sometimes when a book shocks you or makes you have a really big emotional response, you think you love it because it's made you feel things, but just because it shocked you or upset you doesn't necessarily mean it's a good book. Obviously, it's been able to manipulate you into feeling those emotions in a nice way, but does that mean that it is relying on that to make you think it's good, as opposed to, you know, being stylistically good, etc., etc.? So I thought about it for quite a while before doing this section, and I say that it's not just the shocking bits of this book that make it brilliant. I think the tension in here is wonderful. I think that the way the characters are presented is really interesting. I think it makes you second guess yourself a lot. I truly believed in this world as well. I mean, obviously it's very similar to our own world. There's lots of food shortages, there's rising temperatures, etc. But I felt as though I could, with there, you know, I could picture everything, I could feel everything. If you want to be stressed out too, then maybe pick up this book. I think it might be my favourite of the long list so far. Maybe feels, I don't know, I feel nervous saying that, but yeah, no, I'm going to say it. It's my favourite of the long list so far. Let's see if anything else can beat it. Pals, we made it. We made it to the final four. I finished reading the final four books. I want to talk to you about them, and then we're going to rank everything. We're going to talk about favourites. I'm hoping to upload this video on Sunday, tomorrow for me. So if you're watching it the day that this goes up, the shortlist will be announced, I think, on Wednesday. I don't know what the shortlist will be, but we can talk about my predictions, and I would love to know your predictions in the comments section down below as well. So the final four books, before we get onto those, it's a beautiful day today and the bluebells are out in the forest, and I took a little bit of footage of that for you so that you can experience it with me. There you go. It just feels like you're in a painting when you're walking next to bluebells like that. Anyway, back to the books. I sadly don't have a lot to say about this one, which is Paradiso 17 by Hannah Lillith Assadi. I wouldn't normally gravitate towards a book like this, and by that I mean a book that spans a person's entire life. For some reason, I just don't find that particularly appealing. I think it's because there's more plot involved. If you're following someone over the course of their life, presumably lots of things have happened. It can feel quite episodic, whereas I prefer to spend short, sharp amounts of time with a character, really get under their skin and understand how they are feeling in that moment. I just find that more compelling. But this book I think is extremely well written. It's just not set up to be my favourite kind of book. So in this we're following Stoughton, who is dying of cancer. I think he's in his late 70s, I can't quite remember. But anyway, he's at the end of his life and he has a dark humour about that. Like, how ridiculous that I'm dying of cancer in old age when I was born during the Nakba in Palestine in 1948, and I have lived through so many things in my life, and this is what gets me, this. Then we jump back to when he was born, and then we follow him over the course of his life. I think the prose is gorgeous. Let me read you the first sentence. Like all of our dead, Stoughton still speaks, but because his language is now made of shadow, the day rarely admits him, so he finds his daughter Layla in the dream places by night where the stars stretch in their dark beds. I mean, it's beautiful. This is a book about grief, anticipatory grief, not just of self and body, but also of homeland. And this death haunts the whole novel. And as a refugee, Stoughton also feels like he's haunting the places that he visits as he travels across Europe and then also to America. I think the poetic devices used in this are very effective, and I admire it a lot. I just, as I said, don't tend to really love books that span an entire person's life. That's a me problem. That's not a that book problem. Where should we go to next? Okay, so The Others by Sheena Kalayil. I think this is the answer to whether or not I enjoy books about relationships, because I have been saying throughout this video, I don't like this book about love, blah, blah, blah. This has a relationship in it that I was really invested in and restored my faith in myself, actually, to enjoy reading about people who have affection for each other. Thank goodness. Again, this is not normally a book I would gravitate towards. I tend to avoid books set during World War II and also during the Cold War. It seems ridiculous to say been there, done that, but I just feel like, because we study it so much at school and therefore read around the subject so widely, I also find that lots of badly written books tend to be set during that period in time, just using it as a hook to get readers in, but can be quite lazy about it. I'm sure you understand what I mean. So this is probably not one I would gravitate towards. It is set just before the fall of the Berlin Wall, and we're mainly spending time in East Germany under the rule of the DDR, and we at the beginning follow characters Armando and Lolita. What I love about this book is that it is doing something new. So we are following characters in this period of history who we don't normally hear from. So Armando is an immigrant from Mozambique. Lolita has moved to East Germany from India. And obviously these are marginalized voices that we don't often hear from, and it was very refreshing to be reading about them. I also love that Armando has a child from a previous relationship, and a lot of this book is about him trying to work out how he should be with Lolita whilst also seeing his daughter Clara and the dynamics surrounding that. I thought that that was very believable. At the beginning of the book, Armando and Lolita take Armando's daughter Clara to the beach where they find a man who has drowned, and they're very worried about this because they feel as though they've discovered something that they should never have seen. They don't want to draw attention to themselves because the Stasi are obviously very interested in people who perhaps may know those who want to defect. So they're worried that the police might think that they know the person who's drowned, who is clearly trying to flee. I thought that was very tense. And yes, as I said, I was actually very invested in Armando and Lolita's relationship. Where this book fell down for me was the introduction of Theo, who is a white guy living in East Germany with his granddad. He's from a very artistic background. He wants to be a writer. He's very full of himself. The way he behaves towards Lolita just made me want to, for want of a different phrase, punch him in the face. I just could not stand this man. The way I read this was that Theo's appearance and subsequent takeover of the book, which was so annoying because I wanted him to leave and I wanted to get back to Armando and Lolita. His takeover of the book, I think I read it as a representation of white men appearing and taking over the narrative of women and people of colour. And yeah, I guess that's effective, but it made for a very frustrating read for me. Theo, as I said, wants to be a writer. He wants to write about Lolita. He wants to write about Armando. Who does he think he is? But those are the books that up until now we have ended up reading, because those are the voices that are deemed important in the world. We've heard a lot from white men when it comes to history, especially this period. And it would be nice to get more perspective. So if that was the point of the book, to illustrate how frustrating that is, I get it, but it didn't make for an enjoyable read because I didn't want to be spending time with him. So it was kind of a novel of two halves for me. I enjoyed the beginning and I didn't really like the second half very much at all. I would love to know your thoughts if you have read it. A Beast Slinks Towards Beijing by Alice Evelyn Yang is another book that I thought was written really beautifully. It has a lot of tension to it. It's kind of folk horror-y as well. We're following Chenza in America, who receives a call from someone saying they think that they have found her father. She hasn't seen him in 11 years. And he then comes to stay with her. He struggles with alcohol. He may be having some kind of psychosis, or maybe he has dementia, she's not sure, and he's not always very lucid when he's talking to her, but he keeps saying that there's a prophecy that he needs to tell her. So that is the premise. They're trapped in this story that can't really go anywhere, represented by them being together in this very claustrophobic flat all the time. And the only way that they can escape that is by delving into their past to uncover secrets. So we go back several generations in order to understand that. I was so strongly reminded of Violet Coopersmith's book, Build Your House Around My Body, which is Vietnamese folk horror following several generations, looking at generational trauma, repression, family secrets. This is looking back on the Japanese occupation of China, also looking at the Cultural Revolution. There are some truly horrific things that are written about in this book, but I thought that they were written extremely well. This is not one of my favourites, but if you enjoyed Violet Coopersmith's book, which was on the Women's Prize, when was it? 4 years ago? I don't know, several years ago, then I would recommend picking up that one and having a look. And finally, we have Gloria Don't Speak by Lucy Apps. This is a book that I was really nervous to read. I was really nervous to read it. Context, I have been severely let down by non-own voices disability books in the past. I have read many of them as a disabled person trying to find great stories about disability out there, you know, as a book reviewer and as an author. Part of my job is working for an organisation called Inclusive Books for Children, where I read so many books with disability representation and have constantly found the non-own voices disability representation to be lacking, either through naivety, clumsiness, lack of research, upholding stereotypes, cliches, you name it. In fact, at the end of last year was part of the Inclusive Books for Children inclusivity report, which looked at how terrible disability representation is in children's literature specifically. Before anyone comes at me in the comments, I'm not saying that you can't write about disability if you're not disabled yourself. I'm just saying that on the whole, representation from non-own voices has not been brilliant. And that is understandable but frustrating because publishers tend to put their money behind those voices more. It's changing, but as we talked about in the report, it's not changing fast enough. In fact, in recent years, it has gone backwards. You can find out more in that report there. Anyway, that is about publishing and the industry as a whole. It is not about this one specific book. So it's unfair to put that on this, but I'm just saying that's where my head was at when I picked up this book. And what a sigh of relief I sighed when I read it and thought it was brilliant. Thank God. Now, I am not someone who has a learning disability. I am not someone who can say, yes, this book deserves a stamp of approval. I'm just saying, from my perspective and as someone who's read a lot in this sphere, this book did not fall into the same pitfalls that I've seen many other books do. This book is about Gloria. It's set in the 90s initially, and she, as I said, has a learning disability. She lives with her mum and she likes to hang out in parks. She doesn't like talking to people. People try and talk to her because they see her sitting there and think that she's lost or maybe she needs help. But really, for the most part, she would quite like to be left alone. Then one day Gloria meets a man called Jack who decides he's going to take Gloria under his wing. Jack is abhorrent. Jack would quite like women not to speak in general, so it's quite convenient for him that Gloria doesn't speak much. He's also racist and xenophobic and thinks the country is being taken over and the world is going to end when the millennium hits. Then Jack pushes the situation, takes advantage of Gloria. Gloria doesn't really know what she should do, how to advocate for herself, or how to ask for help afterwards. And then Jack does something one night that then changes everything. After that, we jump forward in time a little bit. The thing that I loved about this book is that everything is in the present tense. Gloria thinks in the present tense about everything regarding things happening now, in the future, and in the past. And that creates a sense of immediacy, also of overwhelm and overstimulation, because it's hard to differentiate between different things that have happened, which reflects how she's feeling when she's trying to articulate herself to other people and explain what's happened. I just thought that was so powerful, and at various moments in the book, just perfect. I also found this book to be so readable. Sometimes people say that in a derogatory kind of way. I absolutely mean it as a compliment. If a book is extremely readable, it means that the writer has done their job so well. They've ironed out everything. They've made your work as a reader easy for you. It doesn't mean that you're not thinking as a reader and that there aren't, layers and things for you to consider. But if you're whizzing through a book, it means that you're compelled to keep reading. It means that you are engaged. It means that everything is flowing very well. It means that the voice is strong. So I applaud that very much. For some reason, when I read this book, I was reminded of Adolescence, the TV show. I guess maybe because of Jack himself and his feelings, but also the police interviews that are in here as well. I don't know. I would just say if you enjoyed the TV show Adolescence, I think you will enjoy this as well. This one is definitely going to be, towards the top end of the books from the long list. Okay, so that's all of the books. Let's put them in order. Give me 2 seconds. Probably more than 2 seconds. Okay, so this is my ranking today. If you ask me tomorrow, it might be different, and I reserve the right for it to be different. Okay, so from least favourite to favourite, we have got Kingfisher by Rozie Kelly. Then we've got Heart the Lover by Lily King. Then we've got Dominion by Addie E. Citchens. Then Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. The Benefactors by Wendy Erskine. I've put this here, Paradiso 17 by Hannah Lillith Assadi, because I think the writing in this is brilliant, even though I didn't particularly love the book as a whole. Does that make sense? I hope so. Then we've got The Others by Sheena Kalayil. Then we have A Beast Slinks Towards Beijing by Alice Evelyn Yang, followed by Flashlight by Susan Choi. Then Moderation by Elaine Castillo, which means that now we're on to my personal shortlist. My top 6. In 6th place, we have got Gloria Don't Speak by Lucy Apps. Then we have got The Best of Everything by Kit Duvall in 5th place. The Mercy Step by Marcia Hutchinson in 4th place. The Correspondent by Virginia Evans in 3rd place. Audition by Katie Kitamura in 2nd place. And my favourite was A Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar. Did you guess correctly? I didn't ask you to guess, but if you did guess, did you guess correctly? Did you think that these would be my top 6? I mean, I didn't know what they were going to be until a second ago, so if you didn't guess, that's fine. Now, I said at the beginning of this video that my favourites and the judges' favourites don't always align, but I think I am going to stick to this. I am going to say this is my favourite to win. I don't even know if it's on the shortlist. If it's not on the shortlist, I'm going to have to revise my opinion. But as it stands, I'm going to say that this is my favourite to win. A Guardian and a Thief. I loved it anyway, and if you pick it up, I hope that you love it too. Thank you for watching this video. If you've read any of the long list, let me know in a comment. Who do you think is going to win? Or at least who do you think is going to make the short list? If you're new to my channel and you'd like to subscribe, that would be lovely. And if you enjoyed the content I put out and would like to consider throwing $1 in the tip jar, that would be very kind. Links to Patreon are in the description box down below. Support over there allows me to keep creating free content for you, and there is extra stuff over there as well. This was a long one. I haven't finished editing it yet, but I know it's over an hour. So thank you very much for spending your valuable time with me, and I'm sending lots of love to you all. Bye.